actually call a pivot. Could we do the defensive evolution while we got Tyvis? Because we needed
Let's
Tyvis
do it.
for that. All right, so Tyvis.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the Browns defense last year.
Mm-hmm.
Number one in the NFL in a bunch of different categories. They did what they did better than anyone else did what they did in football, which was rush with your 4 down linemen, play tight man-to-man coverage across the board, and have 1 or 2 high safeties, depending on how they want to stack it, whether it's 1 guy in the hole or 2 guys deep, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, they were beyond successful and efficient at running that defense. They played that cover 2 shell, or the 2 high shell, man-to-man coverage. They didn't blitz. It was like 70% of the time. And that was more than anyone else played any individual defense in football. So I was trying to think, what's the next evolution for the Browns defense? And how can they go from being an elite defense in 2023 to being on that same tier in 2024 without changing the main principles of what they do? Because we know Jim Schwartz isn't going to play a ton of zone. We know he's not going to blitz a lot. He does what he likes to do, and they do it extremely well. So I was thinking, and I'm hoping you could give us some football expertise on this. The next evolution is somehow disguising what they want to do to make quarterbacks and offensive play callers, particularly the more advanced ones, not be able to get a focus and a dial in on what specifically they're doing, play in and play out. We saw Sean Payton by the end of that game. He had a real good feel what the Browns were going to do defensively and was able to kind of pick it apart. Mainly that cover 2 beater against Puka Nacua where he went right up the middle. Bobby Slovic in the playoffs, they had that defense running in circles. So I was trying to think the next evolution has to be somehow disguising what the Browns do best, but not getting away from it. So how can you do that, and what can Jim Schwartz do in 2024 to kind of disguise and mix it up without going away from their DNA?
Well, when you disguise, I mean, the thing is, at this point, everybody knows who you are. They know what you're doing. You can disguise it all you want, but at the end of the day, we know what you're going to do. There's so many ways to tell what you're in. You know, obviously it can come from the form of motion. It can come from, that's a lot of the times it comes from motion. You know, the Patriots used to start their running back out and then bring them in to find out if it's man or zone, and then you go from there. They will have to have an alternate call. That's just what it's going to have to be, because everybody, if they're going to run a whole bunch of man-to-man, then everybody's going to run man-to-man beaters. You're going to see a lot of stacks, a lot of bunches to get them lost in those formations so somebody gets wide open. The thing that I can tell you how to elevate is, I would tell you you would have to get more sacks and more picks. But the problem when you run man-to-man is that you don't really get, when you call man, they don't call man for you to get interceptions. They call man to keep it tight so your guys, your D-line can get there. If you want to get picks, you got to run zone, because now your DBs have eyes on the quarterback. They can see the ball out and they can go make a play. When you're in man, it's very hard to go from my eyes is on my man, I got to make sure that I'm in great position to get my head around, to then make an interception. Like, that's just not going to happen that often, because these wide receivers are really good. So Jim Schwartz has to have an alternate call. They got to come out in their regular shell, their regular thing, and instead of playing man, it's got to be some form of zone. It could be cover 2, it could be cover 3, it could be cover 4. Whatever you want to do. If you want to make it more tighter, you can run a pattern match cover 4, meaning at a certain point, this is my guy. It turns into man after a certain point of a route concept. Problem is, they struggled with that when Joe Woods was here. You think about the Carolina game where they messed it up.
I keep going back to the
that was one of the
communication
things that they messed up on. So I keep telling you, if you want this team to take the next step, it has to come with the form of communication in the DB room and the secondary, because that secondary is they can dictate a whole bunch of things. The problem why they weren't successful before is because they didn't talk. There was no hand signal. It has to be a fact that when one person see it, it has to be echoed out. Everybody has to be on the same page, and you have to be able to come with different forms. Me and G. Bush watched a clip. He sent me this clip about this guy from the post robbing an over route where the corner goes replace him. Well, guess what? That's pre-snap communication. You need to be telling them, hey, I got you on. If he runs an over route, I'm going to cut it. Make sure you replace me in the post. So that corner knows, okay, if this dude runs an over route, my thought is not to drop that and I'm going to the post. Like, those are things that you can do to make your secondary play much better, and you can still be in man-to-man in those things, but that's just an advanced step. So That's how they can get better. It comes with really the form of communication, and Jim Schwartz does have to have an alternate call from a look that he presents.
Is it doable? Like, do the Browns have the personnel to do that with in the secondary?
Yeah. All of them are capable of being great athletes. All it takes is communication, and that's the one thing that I felt that they lacked. But as far as a different coverage call, yeah, I think all of them play zone well. All of them play man well. It's just about communication at the end of the day. And until this secondary, until you able to turn that clip on and see that secondary doing hand signals or something, or saying something like telling them what's going on, that's when you know that secondary is truly taking the next step. Because I still feel like although they play really well, there still wasn't a ton of communication. And
going to year 2 with the same defensive coordinator, does that allow them to make those necessary
because you know
adjustments and disguises and all that?
Yeah, because you should know at this point you've played with the same group of guys. You know what they're good at. You should be able to see the same thing. Y'all should be watching tape together and being able to discuss what y'all see. So I need to know when you see this certain information, I need to already know what you're thinking so we could be on the same page. And I think that comes from spending time together in the offseason, which some of them have, and that comes from watching tape together, and that then talks to making a plan during the week. When we see this is what we're doing this week. And you got to be able to be versatile and switch it up every week. If you keep doing the same thing, teams are going to get aware of what you're doing, and they're going to have a counter to whatever it is that you're doing. So that's the things that I think they need to do, secondary-wise.
Do you think my hypothesis, I guess, for lack of a better word, in terms of what that next step for this defense is, is not plausible, but is that the next step, or do you have a different idea of what the next evolution of this Browns defense could be?
I mean, the next step is that they have the only things that they didn't do well last year is I don't think they led the league in sacks. They didn't lead the league in takeaways, and they struggled on the road. That was the 3 things that was like glaring, and they didn't play well against good quarterbacks, which ties into the first 2 things that they got to get better at anyways. If they get better at takeaways, they become number 1 in takeaways, and they become number 1 in sacks, like that right there, it changes everything, because now these quarterbacks don't have time to go through their whole progression. If they sitting there patting the ball and thinking they got time, then yeah, they're gonna pick you apart at some point. But also, it's up to Jim Schwartz to self-scout himself. If it's 17 games in the season, when you hit the halfway point, you have to be able to have self-scouted yourself to be able to say, this is what an offensive coordinator is going to do. They seen what we've put out through these 8 weeks. We got to come up with counters to what we're doing to keep guys guessing. We're going to continue to still do some of the things that we're good at, but we have to have some type of change up of what we're doing, because offense coordinators going to figure it out, and they're going to come up with a plan, and Houston things is going to happen.
Who is the vocal leader in the secondary? Like, who's making those calls for you?
Oh, it has to be Juan Thornhill.
Thornhill?
He's the only one that actually got some stuff to him. Everybody else is kind of a quiet guy. G New obviously is loud. But when you think about a trash talker, a guy that's going to talk, I think Juan Thornhill be that guy. Plus, he's the post safety, so he's always the furthest back. He can see the entire picture, and he has to be able to communicate with everybody and get Del Pitt, MJ, New, and Denzel on the same page, because he can see the entire formation.
All right, Earl, you got my ear. We have Derek. Austin, you want to do a read and we'll bring him in?